Welcome, addicts. In this video, we're going to be breaking down our top 10 early wide receiver rankings for you guys, going over our projections. We're also going to be doing a more in-depth analysis on each of these players and the guys ranked behind them coming up here pretty soon. So hit that like and subscribe button for more content like this. But let's get right into the video by going to our number 10 guy, starting with Amari Cooper. Now, Amari Cooper does have a new face in town he's going to have to compete with targets for in CeeDee Lamb, but we're not expecting CeeDee Lamb to make a massive impact on his potential volume. Heading into 2020, Amari Cooper just got that massive deal, but it really is only a 2-year deal when you look at the structure of the contract. The Cowboys can get out of it after 2 years. So if Amari Cooper wants to continue playing for the Cowboys, he's going to have to perform really well over the course of the next couple of seasons. Now, Amari Cooper has been one of the most inconsistent week by week fantasy players since he's been in the league. He has dominant weeks and then other weeks where he completely disappears, and a lot of that typically happens with home road splits. Now, what's interesting this year, if the NFL plays without fans, I don't know how much of those home road splits will continue to happen for guys like Amari Cooper, so this could actually be a really good season for Amari. Right now, we have him projected at 81 receptions and 1,150 yards and total of 8 touchdowns, but if there really isn't such a thing as home field advantage, or rather playing on the road in this upcoming season, just based on everything that's happening in our country and our world right now. Amari Cooper could actually be a singing value, especially with the amount of passing volume that we expect the Cowboys to have to put up in order to play and compete. Considering how bad their defense is looking on paper, Amari Cooper could be in for a really good year. So we have him ranked at number 10 right now, and we'll keep going. So jumping over to number 9, one of the better receivers in PPR last year, Allen Robinson, gets to finally play, or at least what we're projecting right now is going to get to play with Nick Foles. Maybe Mitch Trubisky will be able to impress and keep his job there. But we're expecting the amount of money that paid Nick Foles to come over. We're expecting him to get the starting job, which I think would actually be a benefit for Allen Robinson. I feel bad for this guy. He's never gotten to play with a really good quarterback who's done nothing but produce his entire career. But we're expecting more of the same from last year, and he's kind of one of the most undervalued receivers in the NFL right now. A lot of times he falls into the third and fourth round, but really there's no reason to expect him to do much worse than he did last year. And we actually even have him projected to be doing a little bit less than he did last year, and he's still coming in as our number 9 wide receiver here. 91 receptions, 1,130 yards, and 8 total touchdowns. All right, jumping over to number 8, we have Kenny Golladay, expecting another step forward from Kenny Golladay, but really it's not even much of a step forward. It's just expecting Matthew Stafford to play the entire season. Kenny Golladay was on a complete tear before Matthew Stafford went down due to the back issue, and from that point, playing with David Blau and Jeff Driscoll, his stats took a massive hit, but very, very useful in the red zone, has every opportunity to score 10 touchdowns or more. We have him projected at 10 right now, and that might actually be on the low end, but projected at 75 receptions and close to 1,200 yards. Should be in for a really nice and consistent season. Another guy that you can get in the third round, typically in most drafts, at least right now based on ADP. All right, looking at number 7, DeAndre Hopkins. Now we have him a little bit lower than consensus, and hear me out on why. Over the past really past couple of decades, every time a top 12 wide receiver heads to a new team, the vast majority of the time we see a statistical drop in production. DeAndre Hopkins is used to seeing well over 150 targets each year. He's going to a team that, while they do throw the ball a lot, there's a lot of target competition with Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald, both guys who had over 100 targets last year. They've got rising stars like Andy Isabella and Hakeem Butler there. Kenyon Drake is going to demand a lot of targets, and we're not expecting there to be as much of the passing volume pie going to DeAndre Hopkins, but we don't expect it to decline like massively to the point you don't draft him. It's just where he's going in drafts right now. We're probably not going to pay the premium that would take to get a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. We still have him projected at 90 receptions and 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns, which puts him right at 257 points. But if you notice from some of the other names we've mentioned, that we're not projecting him to score massively or exponentially more than some of the other receivers around him. It could also be a little bit splotchy, like if there's, especially based, we really need to just keep following everything that's happening with these teams as we go forward into the unknown with everything that's happening with the pandemic. There may or may not be traditional training camp. It's looking more likely that there will be, but the longer that these new quarterback and receiver pairings go without being able to play with each other, we know that Kyler Murray already has comfort with both Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald, and it could take a little while for DeAndre Hopkins to truly come on board. So this could be one of those, he starts the season off slow and then ends the season as one of the better receivers again. But overall, with the projected drop in overall target share projection, we're probably not going to end up with DeAndre Hopkins on a lot of our teams this year. All right, jumping over to number 6, we have DJ Moore. Now, DJ Moore is another one of those guys that I feel like is very, very undervalued right now, and you can get him typically a whole round after DeAndre Hopkins, even though we're expecting him to come out with a better fantasy season. He had an incredible floor last year through 15 games, and we're expecting another increase in his production this year, getting to move from the terrible quarterback play of Kyle Allen and jumping up to Teddy Bridgewater, who was actually the second most accurate quarterback in the NFL last year. This defense is absolutely terrible. It's garbage. They're going to have to throw the ball a lot. They want to compete. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is going to be the one of the most heavily involved running backs, so that eats into the pie a little bit. And then with Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson there, it's not like DJ Moore is playing on an island by himself, but he was so good last year, especially in yards after the catch. His biggest downfall was his involvement in the red zone. We're expecting him to take a really massive leap forward in the touchdown department this year as well. Right now we have him projected for 95 receptions, 1,200 total yards, and 7 touchdowns. But if that went even higher, I wouldn't be surprised. It's not like DJ Moore can't score touchdowns. It was just Kyle Allen can't throw touchdowns. So expecting a much better year from DJ Moore, even though last year was already superb. DJ Moore is our Chris Godwin candidate in 2020. All right, jumping up to number 5. Speak of the devil, there's Chris Godwin at number 5. Expecting him to be the most utilized wide receiver for Tom Brady coming into Tampa Bay. We're expecting him to be a little less productive than he was on a per game basis last season, just based on the expectation of this team not needing to air it out nearly as much as they did with Jameis Winston, who basically made every game a shootout by getting the other team into the game by throwing pick sixes almost every game, felt like anyway. Chris Godwin, we're still expecting him to get close to 90 receptions and 1,200 total yards. That touchdown category is the one that is the hardest to project right now. We don't know whether Brady will favor Chris Godwin near the red zone, or if it will be more of a Mike Evans and Gronk show. So that one could end up hurting him if he ends up not hitting on the touchdown mark, but he could easily outproduce his reception and total yardage if Chris Godwin does turn into the explosive version of Julian Edelman that we're hoping that he becomes with Tom Brady coming to Tampa Bay. All right, jumping up to number 4. This one's pretty easy. We have Julio Jones. Now, Julio Jones entering his year 31 season. He's going to be hitting a cliff at some point in his career, but we're not projecting it to happen quite yet. Falcons didn't do much to address their already poor defense, so we're expecting them to have to continue to air the ball out. Matt Ryan is looking to continue his trend of going every other season and being a really productive fantasy quarterback, and this would be the year that his projections go up. We are expecting Calvin Ridley to be pretty heavily involved, but I think there's enough passing volume to go around for both Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley to have a massive year. Expecting Julio Jones pretty close to 100 receptions and over 1,300 total yards, I believe, for his 5th year in a row. And 7 total touchdowns might seem a little bit low, but we're still a little bit bullish on his overall fantasy projection, having him here at number 4. Jumping up to number 3, this is where it starts to get a little bit chalky, but we have Tyreek Hill here. Actually have him projected for basically the same amount of points as Julio Jones right now, subject to change as the offseason goes on. We're not expecting him to be receiving as many catches as Julio Jones, but he has been a touchdown monster for Patrick Mahomes, and expecting Patrick Mahomes to throw close to 40 touchdowns, it's pretty reasonable to expect Tyreek Hill to get a fair share of those. So right now, 81 receptions, 1,276 total yards, and 11 total touchdowns would put him as our wide receiver 3. And jumping up to wide receiver 2, Davante Adams. This is where we're super chalk at this point, but it's hard to imagine Davante Adams not having another massive season, the Packers, in their infinite wisdom, decided not to address the receiver position, even though that was arguably the weakest receiver core in the entire NFL. Maybe they were 31st, just above the Philadelphia Eagles last year, but clearly they needed help for Davante Adams, and they didn't get him any. So Aaron Rodgers is going to be forced to continue to force feed his favorite target on compiling receptions alone. This could actually be a low estimate here at 104 receptions. He could easily get close to 120, 130 if guys like Alan Lazard and Jay Sternberger don't actually take a step forward. We do have them projected to at least do a little bit better, and we're projecting Aaron Jones to be a bit more involved in the pass game, which is why we only have him at 100 receptions, but he's pretty much a lock for 10 touchdowns if both Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams play the full 16-game season. We're projecting him for a total of 294 fantasy points. And then, of course, our number one, Michael Thomas. Hard to ignore the records that he broke last year. Drew Brees still looks to be able to pepper him with targets, and as long as he continues to see the massive difference-making volume, we're still expecting there to be a little bit of a decline, because every time you have a record-breaking season, you're not going to project him to do better the following year, but putting him at 123 receptions, 1,400 total yards, and 9 total touchdowns still gives him a pretty clear advantage as the number one wide receiver. It's just hard to come to grips with what your team looks like when you have to spend an early first on Michael Thomas. If the big five running backs are gone, that's the first time they were actually looking to take Michael Thomas, but I'm still more comfortable taking him around the mid to the back of the first round, which I doubt in most PPR leagues he's going to fall that far. So just based on his draft price, we're probably not going to end up with him on too many of our teams, but we do expect him to be productive, and we expect the continuation of last season to, we're not expecting too much regression here for Michael Thomas, especially just considering how consistent productive wide receivers typically are. They're one of the they're one of the easiest positions to project just based on prior year usage and stats, and there really wasn't too much that changed with this team other than the Saints basically replacing Ted Ginn with Emmanuel Sanders. I don't think that's going to eat too much into Michael Thomas's stats, maybe slightly. And obviously with Alvin Kamara playing a whole season healthy, I think that would be another reason why we would see a little bit of a stat decline, but it's not enough. I mean, we're projecting him already to lose about 40 fantasy points over the course of the season, and that still puts him clear at our number one. But anyway, we're going to continue breaking these guys down individually, so make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Also check out our website for an entire list of rankings that you guys can use regardless of your scoring system. We have multiple scoring systems up there, so check that out, and we'll see you guys in the next video.